guys, welcome back to the second key knowledge dot point in this third outcome focused on the external business environment. In the first video, we just had a bit of an overview of what we mean by the external environment and those two layers within it, the macro and the operating. So now what we're doing is starting to work through the macro factors. So you can see there the subheading on the left, macro facts affecting business planning. And the first one is key legal and government regulations. So that is our focus for this particular video. So again, we come back to this diagram and I will keep showing this because this is a really good just kind of reference point in your head to understand how this kind of works. If you have this diagram in your head and where all the things sit, that will help you kind of compartmentalize this knowledge in your own mind as we go through this and when you're studying for the SAC and the exam, etc. So there we see government and legal sitting there, 1.3.2 right at the top. So that is our focus for this one. So what are we talking about here? So when we are planning or when we're running a business, there's a bunch of legal and government regulations that you have to be aware of and deal with. Mentioned in previous video or two, this idea that, as citizens, as business owners, we need to have an awareness of all of the laws and regulations that kind of regulate our lives, our business, whatever it might be, to make sure that we're remaining compliant with them. Because if we are not compliant with them, then there are obviously consequences that we might bear later on down the track. So this is really, really important for business owners to know. Now, look, there's lots of different ways you could kind of chop this up, but this is how we'll do it. There's requirements around tax, industry regulations, some council regulations, environmental laws and employment laws. Look, there would be more than that, but we don't have to cover everything. This is just to give you a bit of an idea about how this kind of plays out. So although these are not mentioned in the study design, and I keep talking about the script, this is the script for this particular one, because that's all we're going to cover in this video. I mean, if you are aware of others, you could use them, but probably not wise because these are the only ones we're going to talk about here and you're going to make notes on. So first off, tax requirements. So before you even start trading with your new business, you need to going to do some or all of the following, depending on what is the business structure that you're using. So depending on the structure will dictate which of these you need to do, and also how much revenue you're expecting to make. There's a few different things, but basically these are the standard things that a lot of business owners would need to be doing before they start trading. So registering your business name, getting an Australian business number, getting a tax file number, registering for GST, and registering for pay-as-you-go income tax if you are going to be employing anybody, okay? So this is all stuff based around tax. You really don't need to know at this stage any more detail around any of those. This is just a bit of an outline. So there's, if you're asked questions around this, there's requirements around tax, and you could just throw in a couple of these examples. The second one on our list was industry regulations. So these are sets of unique rules and regulations that kind of apply to specific industries, okay? So they obviously vary between industries and the types of business, but things like requirements for certain types of licenses for either the business or the people working for the business might need, various types of permits that might be applicable, or various regulations that you might need to meet. So requirements for employees to gain certain types of qualifications also, or certain types of checks. So for example, a working with children check or a police check. So if your business is going to involve any kind of interaction with kids, then you need to be aware of as a business owner that you're going to need to get working with children's checks on any employees. In the financial services industry, banking, for example, they do police checks on all of the employees coming in, and they're trying to uncover, if people have a background in theft or fraud or anything, because then that might limit those employees' ability to work in that industry. Types of licenses, permits, think food industry. There's lots and lots of regulations around the food industry, food handling, food storage, that sort of thing. So it's going to be unique depending to your type of business, but whatever your type of business, you need to make yourself aware of any of the industry regulations that surround your type of business and make sure you are adhering to them. Council regulations, these are ones that I think often kind of get overlooked. Local councils have a lot of rules and regulations which businesses that operate within the area must also abide by. So things like zoning laws. Okay, you need to be aware that you can't just go and open any type of business in any location. Okay, the council have zoning maps of their area which identify the nature of the types of businesses that can operate in certain areas. So, for example, in residential areas, you can't have a business that's going to be producing a lot of noise, for example. Shopping strips, again, there's certain types of business that you could have in that type of location and not others. So you would need to check with local council if you had a particular idea a location for your business. You need to check that that's in adherence with the local council zoning laws, because otherwise you're going to get shut down pretty quickly. Waste disposal as well. There's a lot of local council regulations around when and where businesses can dispose of their waste, which again, you need to look into. Obviously, particularly if you're a business that is going to be producing a lot of waste. So, maybe a food business again, any kind of cafe or restaurants, you're going to be producing waste. You can't just do what you want with that waste. You have to make sure you understand the council regulations of where you're operating are, how that waste needs to be dealt with. Operating hours also, you can't just decide your opening hours willy-nilly and, just run with that. You need to check with local council. And again, this will be linked into the zoning as well. You just can't operate your business 24 hours if that is not in adherence with council bylaws around opening hours in that particular type of location. They also have a lot of building permit and regulations. So this relates to the changing of shop fronts and signage. So again, you can't just go and stick any old kind of signage that you want on the front of your premises. You need to check with council and get it all approved. And this actually even applies to changing the internal layout of a premises. You can't just do the renos that you want to do. You would need to check with council and get their approval before changing any internal layouts to those premises. So lots of different aspects to this you need to be thinking about. Fourth category, environmental laws. So these are obviously, this is legislation designed to protect the environment from harm that businesses could potentially do to it. So again, as a business owner, you need to be aware of all legislation that can apply to your kind of business. So examples include minimizing water and energy use, reusing and recycling waste, that sort of stuff. So again, it's going to depend on the type of business. And, some businesses have, more potential to do damage to the environment than others. But again, something you need to be aware of and something that you need to build into your planning. And then finally, employment laws. So obviously this is only going to be applicable to you if you are actually going to be employing people. Even if you're thinking about employing people into the future, it's worth kind of making some plans about this right from the outset. And there's lots of laws around occupational health and safety, minimum wages and conditions that you're allowed to pay and set for your employees. Lots of law around unfair dismissal, the fact that, if you're not happy with a staff member, you can't just sack them. There's a process you have to go through. Dispute resolution processes if there are any disputes with your employees, and anti-discrimination laws, which have become more of a big thing in the last few years. And the laws have been updated a bit as it relates to that in the last few years as well. So again, these are laws actually that are actually quite fluid and dynamic, and are constantly being updated and amended. So again, you need to be on top of those amendments and changes as that all happens as well. Look, just some terminology I'm going to throw in here. Don't often do this with these videos, but just some terminology that you might come across in case material when we're looking at questions here. An industry, I've used that word lots, but an industry just referring to a group of business that sell the same type of products or service. The hospitality industry, the fast food industry, the mobile phone service provider industry, the fitness industry, so on and so forth. You get what I mean? A permit is just something that grants a business permission to do something. Australian Business Licence and Information Service, more commonly known as ABLIS. So this is a free government service that helps business owners determine actually which licenses, permits, registrations, and all that stuff they need. In class, we do an activity that will demonstrate that to you. So you put in some information about your business, and it will tell you exactly which types of permits, licenses, etc. that you need. So that's a really, really good starting point. And working with children check, touched on this before, criminal background check for individuals who are working or volunteering with children under the age of 18. Pretty straightforward. Unfair dismissal. This is where an employee feels that they're being dismissed for an invalid or unjust reason. That's why there's laws around dismissal. I mentioned before, you can't just dismiss an employee willy-nilly because you're not happy with them. There is a process that you need to go through. Otherwise, that employee could come back and take you to the Fair Work Commission, which is like a court for employment, with a case of unfair dismissal, which you really don't want to have. Tax, we understand what taxes are, I think, but if you had to define them, compulsory payments to government, which is then used to provide public goods and services to the community at large, so health, education, defence, so on and so forth. GST, I mentioned earlier, but I didn't really touch on what it was. Tax imposed on the sale of most goods and services. So this is something that as a business owner, if your revenue hits a certain level, I think at the moment, at the end of 2023, it's $75,000, I believe. If you've got revenues of $75,000 or more, you need to be collecting GST on all of those sales and then giving that back to the government. And the ATO, the Australian Taxation Office, that's the government agency that collects its tax revenue for the Australian government. And that's it for our legal and government regulations. Nothing too complicated, not too long, but make sure, again, you've got some good notes. You've compartmentalised all of that, so you've got easy access to it when you're answering those questions and you're studying for those SACs and the exam. But that's it for now. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers for now.